Welcome to Very Merry, a 4-part series just in time for Christmas. Throughout this series, we will be showcasing 8 holiday-inspired designs using 3 basic colors, failing a little, and painting with gold luster dust. Today I decorate the gingers and try doing filigree for the first time. I have been looking forward to this series for a while. And in order to effectively design, decorate, edit, and deliver these videos consistently, I start months ahead of time. To get you the episodes in December, I started thinking about this series back in August. So I scoured the internet for cutters. There are so many options, and I wanted to have cutters that would produce a full set that looked like they belonged together, even if the cutters weren't all designed together. And since I wanted cutters that have STL files so that I could print them on Cameraman's 3D printer, I had an additional limitation to work with. Luckily, I was able to find all of the cutters, except one I already owned, on the Kaleidacuts website. Each of the cutter designs has a bit of a chubby look to them, which appealed to me. Once I had all the cutters printed out, I sat down with my preferred design tools: graph paper, a pencil, eraser, and the cutters. I first had to come up with a color palette. I do typically design these sets in the order that they will be released, so I knew that right before this series, I would be making Sweet Baby, which featured a gorgeous Christmas red and a beautiful coordinating blue. Not wanting to have another set full of red, I decided to highlight the greens. I have recently been enjoying the process of designing by using only a few colors in each series. Think the candy corn colors of Halloweenish and the aforementioned red, white, and blue of Sweet Baby. Besides black and white, I only used 2 icing colors in each of those sets. So for this set, I wanted to again keep it simple. I decided on 2 variations of green and a medium brown. Next, I needed to figure out what kind of aesthetic I wanted. The set is meant to have a classic, almost vintage feel to it. Though as you will see in part 4, there is one design that clearly came out looking like camouflage. Now that I think about it, you might not actually be able to see it. Just kidding. This little guy required almost no creativity on my part. He is pretty much a standard, straightforward, run-of-the-mill gingerbread man, looking very dapper with his perfectly styled hair and neat bow tie. For the entire series, I will be using a 1 consistency outline and flood icing, along with a soft peak piping consistency for all of the details. You may have noticed that when I flooded this cookie, the brown icing didn't settle on its own, and I had to use my scribe a bit to get it all nicely flush. I would say that for my personal preference, this brown is a tiny bit thicker than ideal, which required a bit more scribe action on my part. Not a huge deal. Now, if my cookies were larger, the thicker icing would likely be a problem for me, especially because right now in good old Southern California, in the middle of November as I write this commentary, it is very dry, which would cause my icing to dry quicker than I could work with, leaving ugly pointy bits and scrapey marks in my icing. Though luckily, we finally have some rain in our forecast over the next several days. The black I'm using here is the only black you will find in this entire set. It just didn't seem right to use my green or brown for his face. I love using a soft peak for details like this. As you probably noticed from the side shot, When I piped on his eyes, the icing produced a nice pointy peak, except I didn't want a nice pointy peak. So agitating the icing just a little allows it to settle nicely, resulting in a smooth, glass-like finish, but stays exactly where I want it to. If I were to use a looser icing, it would kind of melt and flatten out a bit. I have tried making a mouth before with icing, but I don't like how it looks. So instead, I'm using my cheapy edible ink marker I purchased on Amazon. While I usually hate the look of an outline on my cookies, for his bow, I intentionally let the outline dry so that I could see it. And though it is a little bit lopsided, I just chalk that up to how difficult it is to get the sides even when actually tying a bow. As I settle the icing, I'm careful to avoid nicking the outline with the tip of my scribe, which would likely take a nice little chunk out of it, ruining the look I'm intending. I also want the icing to go right up to the edge of the outline, but not go over it. Next, we will make his little matching gingerbread house, trying out that filigree I promised. You might find it a little bit curious that I didn't actually make the cookies themselves gingerbread. They're pumpkin spice, which I have been using for all of my fall cookies. If you're interested to know how I make my pumpkin spice no-spread sugar cookies, I cover that in the episode Icing Cozy Pie, which I have linked down in the description for you. Truth be told, I haven't ever had gingerbread cookies. But as I write this commentary, I have a batch of gingerbread dough rolled out and chilling in my fridge, waiting for me to take my cutters to it. I'll be honest though, the recipe I found seems to have left me with a dough that is a bit on the soft side. And so I'm anticipating having to make some adjustments to get it to my liking. I will say though, that it smells absolutely wonderful. I cannot wait for the scent once I get them into the oven. I have left a gap between my bits of snow because the design I came up with requires me to flood in sections instead of flooding the cookie all at one time, like I did with the ginger dude. I also intentionally left a little bit of cookie edge showing with this flood because of what's next. Using Grandma's pretty glass bowl to catch most of my mess, I apply these pearly little round sugar sprinkles called nonpareils while the icing is still wet. Please ignore the little boo-boo on my arm. That is a result of a baking accident. I purchased the multi-size nonpareils on Amazon for only $8.99, which I thought was a decent price and perfect for the 2 applications I needed for this set. Adding the nonpareils in this way does require a bit of adjustment using the scribe to push the sprinkles on the edges into the icing. In my opinion, if done properly, adding sprinkles to a cookie instantly upgrades the look of the design. And the best part, it's super simple. Another bonus is that the sprinkles create a texture difference that your cookie tasters may enjoy running their fingers over and then crunching on while they eat their cookies. What can I say? Texture is of utmost importance to me. Oh, also, the sprinkles that get captured in my bowl go right back into the container. I am not a fan of wasting. Into the dehydrator set at 95 degrees, my cookie goes for about 15 minutes to allow the first sections to crust over so that when I add in my brown icing, there is a defined separation between the sections. Now, truthfully, If I had not added the sprinkles to the snowy area, I think I might have opted to do this cookie using the wet next to wet technique instead. However, recall that for this set, I am going for a classic vintage feel, ergo, a slightly fancy look. And I'm not sure the wet next to wet would quite have been able to achieve that. Since I will not be placing any sprinkles on top of the brown, I do my best to lay down a nice line of icing on the edge of my cookie. And as I flood up against the white, I squeeze my bag a little more to allow a larger bead of icing to nestle nicely up to the edge of my snow. If you were watching closely, you might have noticed that the brown icing I'm using on this cookie seems to be settling a little bit better than it did on the ginger dude. That is because I actually stopped in the middle of my decorating and rebagged my brown flood icing after adding a few more drops of water to it. I have learned that pushing through and using the icing instead of just taking 3 minutes out to make the icing adjustment just isn't worth the irritation. And over the course of the set, I saved myself way more than 3 minutes of extra scribing. Now for the filigree. Before designing this series, I had not a clue that this was called filigree. In fact, because I'm so curious and I want to be sure to relay to you the best information I can, I just looked it up. So, what is filigree? According to dictionary.com, a delicate ornamental work of fine silver, gold, or other metal wires, especially lacy jewelers' work of scrolls and arabesques. So at first glance, this isn't technically filigree. But definition 2 says, anything very delicate or fanciful. Now that seems like a little bit of a stretch, considering definition 1 is so specific. But I guess I'll acquiesce and use the term for this technique. Because really, what am I going to call it? Scrolls and arabesques? Yeah, filigree is easier. Since this is the very first time I have attempted this so-called filigree, I am not finding it easy to achieve the very delicate and fanciful nature of my scrolls and arabesques. Why is this amusing me so? I am literally chuckling at my childish, repetitive use of the filigree's definition. In case I haven't said it in a while, I love making these videos for you. So thank you. Seriously, thank you for taking the time out to watch when there are so many other people you could be giving your attention to right now. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, why is this difficult? Well, while I can't exactly say why, I can tell you the what. The what I'm having trouble with are the nice flowy curves. It appears I currently have 1.5 nice curves. So I definitely have a really good opportunity for improvement.
And how might that occur?
Why, thank you for asking, cameraman. Well, since practice makes progress and progress propels, I think I shall try again and again. Though, if you consider that my door looks like it belongs in a Dr. Seuss book, my off-kilter filigree isn't so suspicious looking. I am painting my little doorknob using luster dust. It's an itsy-bitsy, teeny-weeny yellow golden pop of color I thought would go very nicely here to tie into the overall vintage theme of my set. Don't worry, I go over painting in part 2. I am very happy with the gingers. See you next time.
Next time on Kuny's Cookie Chronicles.
This is part 2 of Very Merry. In part 1, we made this cute little ginger duo. Today, we have 3 different designs on the menu, and one that includes the perfect opportunity to paint with gold luster dust.